Your room isn't your room anymore, Ava. After Christmas, it's Layla's, my mother said, swirling her wine like she was discussing new curtains, not erasing my existence. My dad didn't even look up from his tablet. Chloe smirked. Liam checked his watch. I just stood there in the doorway, holding a box of handmade gifts I'd spent 4 months creating for them, feeling my throat burn while everyone acted like this was perfectly reasonable. They thought I'd still show up, smile for photos, play the grateful black sheep. But what they didn't know was that I had already heard their real plan for me that Christmas. I'm Ava Morgan, 29, a jewelry designer, and that night my family tried to delete me. Before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt that sting of being the outsider in your own family, the one they talk about when they think you're not listening. This story, it only gets darker from here. My name is Ava Morgan. I'm 29 years old, and for most of my life I believe my family loved me in the way families are supposed to, unconditionally, endlessly, almost blindly. But love in the Morgan household always came with fine print silent clauses tucked between polite smiles and perfectly curated family photos. I grew up inside Morgan Estate, a place that looked like the backdrop of a Christmas movie but felt to me like a museum, beautiful, cold, and full of signs that said, "Don't touch." The house smelled like lemon polish and Vivian Morgan's favorite white peonies even in winter. Every door closed softly, every step echoed on marble, and every conversation sounded like it was meant for the neighbors to overhear and applaud. The first time I realized I wasn't like the rest of them, I was 8. I had spent an entire afternoon twisting silver wire into a little star pendant, proud of how it caught the kitchen light. I remember running to the dining room, clutching it in my small hands, eager to show my mom. Vivian looked at it, smiled politely, and said, "Cute," the same way she'd comment on a child's drawing stuck to a fridge. Then she placed it inside a drawer with her unopened charity mailers and said we'd keep it there for safekeeping. I didn't know it then, but that drawer was where dreams went to suffocate. My siblings never had to beg for validation. Liam was the golden boy, calm, brilliant, disciplined. Chloe was razor sharp, already cross-examining teachers in middle school. They didn't make jewelry, they made sense in our family system. I, on the other hand, made noise, color, texture, things that didn't contribute to Morgan Ridge Capital or look good on a Christmas card. For years, I played along. Straight A's, AP classes, NYU business, because creative paths don't have safety nets, according to Dad. I told myself that fitting in, being palatable, was the price for belonging. I swallowed every dismissal, every comparison, every backhanded compliment like they were vitamins that would eventually make me stronger. Thanksgiving during sophomore year of college was the first crack in my facade. I'd taken a jewelry and metal arts elective just to fill a requirement, but something in me lit up in that workshop, surrounded by fire metal and possibility. I came home wearing a pair of earrings I'd made myself. They were imperfect, slightly asymmetrical, but they felt like mine. Chloe took one look and said, "Those look very Etsy." My mother blinked twice and whispered to Dad, "It's a phase, don't panic." So I laughed it off, pretended I didn't care. But the truth, that one comment cut deeper than they realized. I didn't know it back then, but that would matter later. Senior year brought the turning point. Dad arranged an internship for me at Morgan Ridge Capital, a golden opportunity he told anyone who would listen. He announced it at dinner like a graduation gift, but I had already planned to spend that summer launching my first online shop. When I told him, his fork froze midair. "Ava, don't be ridiculous," he said. "You can make your bracelets on weekends. This is your future." "It is my future," I whispered, but barely anyone heard me. Vivian sighed, long and theatrical, and Chloe muttered, "God, here we go." Liam stared at his plate. I sat there feeling small, but also strangely awake. The silence after I declined the internship was heavier than any storm cloud. Dad didn't speak to me for weeks. Vivian told her friends I was exploring creative outlets before settling down. I didn't know it then, but that silence would grow into a wall. After graduation, I moved to Brooklyn, a tiny apartment with leaky windows and a radiator that hissed like it had opinions. I ate cheap noodles, worked 16-hour days, and built AVA//M from scratch. There were months I didn't know if I could afford groceries, but somehow I never felt as lonely as I did at Morgan Estate. Still, every holiday I went back. Every Christmas I dressed up, covered the smell of metal and solder with perfume, walked into that house hoping this would be the year they saw me, and every year the gap between us stretched a little wider. Thanksgiving last year was the worst. I wore a dress made by a small designer friend, soft velvet, hand-stitched. Vivian looked me up and down and said, "That's surprisingly casual for tonight. You didn't have time to shop." Chloe giggled. Liam cleared his throat like he wanted to say something but didn't. I swallowed the humiliation with the cranberry sauce, pretending it didn't sting. But it carved deeper than I thought. And the truth is, all those microcuts, all those tiny humiliations, they were what made the moment I overheard in Dad's office hit like a knife to the ribs. I just didn't know it was all about to collapse. The week leading up to last Christmas, things were already tense between me and my family, though attention in the Morgan house was always wrapped in expensive paper and tied with a silk bow. My mom called multiple times a day not to ask how I was doing, but to confirm head counts, seating charts, and gift color palettes. Vivian Morgan curated holidays like events for royalty. There was no room for imperfection, no room for individuality, and definitely no room for the daughter who sold handmade jewelry online. I remember packing gifts for them in my Brooklyn studio the night before I left. My workbench was cluttered with sketches, polishing cloths, and tiny gemstones that shimmered under the yellow lamp. I'd spent 4 months creating custom pieces, for each person a silver cuff for Dad, engraved with the coordinates of the First Morgan Ridge Capital Office, a delicate pendant for Mom resembling her favorite peony petals hammered to reflect light, a minimalist bracelet for Chloe with 3 gold links, one for each childhood promise we made, and for Liam, a piece I'd designed after noticing he always fidgeted with the edge of his watch band. I had crafted these gifts with care, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they'd see the intention, the thought, the love. I didn't know it then, but those gifts would flip the entire Christmas dinner upside down. Driving up to Westchester, the snow had just begun to fall. The roads were slick, the sky a dull gray, and my chest felt tight with the familiar mix of hope and dread. The estate came into view like a painting, tall windows, glowing warm gold wreaths, perfectly symmetrical giant Christmas tree sparkling through the front room window. It was beautiful. It always was. And every year I tried to convince myself beauty meant belonging. When Rosa opened the door, her face lit up. She hugged me so tightly I felt something in me crack. I didn't realize how much I needed that. "Miss Ava," she whispered, "it's good you're here early." I didn't understand what she meant until later. Inside, everything had that crisp, curated smell, fresh pine, expensive candles, cinnamon, that somehow never tasted like real cinnamon. The floors gleamed. The staircase was wrapped in garlands, and somewhere in the distance I heard my mother barking instructions to the caterers. The first red flag came fast. I walked into the kitchen holding the box of gifts, smiling, ready to help. Vivian looked over her shoulder and gave me a thin-lipped greeting. "Ava, there you are. Guest room in the east wing is prepared for you." "Not my old room," I tried to sound casual. "We needed the space this year," she said, already turning away. Chloe chimed in without looking up from her tablet. "Layla's flying in from California. She's using it now, just like that." 19 years of memories erased to make room for a cousin who visited maybe once every 5 years. My heart sank. A warning bell rang quietly inside me, but I pushed it down. I didn't know it then, but they'd already started clearing out my things. Later that afternoon, I went upstairs and peeked into my old room. The sight made my stomach drop. Boxes everywhere, shelves empty. The bed bare except for a stack of folded linens. It felt like walking into a crime scene of my own childhood. I touched the empty bookshelf, remembering the little jars of beads I used to hide behind my textbooks, the sketchbooks filled with designs no one ever cared to see. It was all gone. I wasn't expected to come home again, not really. That night, after settling in the smaller guest room, I went searching for my dad. I wanted to show him the cuff I made, hoping he'd understand its meaning. I found him in his office, the one place we weren't allowed to interrupt. The door was cracked open and I heard voices. Liam's, Chloe's, my mom's, and another man's. I would later learn his name was Ryan Blake, a financial advisor. I was about to knock when I heard my name. "She'll never stabilize her income," Chloe said. "It's delusional, this jewelry thing. Vivian responded, which is why the intervention needs to be firm. She needs structure, Daniel. She needs a real job. My father's voice was calm, business-like the way he spoke in meetings. After Christmas dinner, we'll present the plan. If she refuses the offer at the firm, we cut ties financially. I froze. Intervention, cut ties, present the plan. My stomach twisted so hard I had to hold on to the wall. Then Ryan Blake's voice. The LLC in her name will give you leverage. She won't walk away once she understands her liability exposure. LLC. In my name, my pulse roared in my ears. Vivian added, and once her room is cleared out, maybe she'll understand she can't just run back here every time life gets hard. Everyone laughed softly. Everyone except Liam. He said nothing. I didn't know it then, but that silence, it would matter later. I stepped back slowly, breaths, shaking, knowing in that moment something inside me had finally irreversibly snapped. I left the house before any of them realized I'd heard it all. When I drove away from Morgan Estate that night, I didn't feel heroic or brave. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped the insides out of me and left just enough strength to steer the wheel. Snow slapped against the windshield, the radio crackled. My hands were shaking so badly I had to pull into a gas station just outside White Plains. The moment I parked, everything crashed in on me. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, breath coming in shallow bursts. The fluorescent lights above flickered, buzzing like angry insects. A tired-looking woman was restocking windshield wipers inside the store. Holiday music played faintly through tinny speakers. The world went on unaware that my family had just decided to dismantle my life. I didn't cry immediately. The shock was too thick. It wasn't until I opened my phone and saw a text from my mom, "Bring your red dress for tomorrow," that the tears finally burned their way out. I slid down in the seat chest, tight, feeling 8 years old again. I didn't know it then, but this breakdown would turn into the first crack of freedom I'd ever tasted. I called Mia because I didn't know who else could hold the weight. The moment she said Ava, I fell apart. She didn't rush me. She just let the silence carry me until the words spilled out in broken pieces. "They're planning an intervention," I whispered, "on Christmas, in front of everyone." "What the hell?" Her voice sharpened instantly. "What do you mean, intervention? They want to force me to join Dad's company. My voice cracked. "They cleared out my room, Mia. They actually emptied it." There was a pause. A long, deliberate pause. "Ava," she said finally, "that's not concern. That's control. That's abuse." Hearing the word abuse hit harder than anything my family had said. It was like a curtain lifting. Something I wasn't prepared to see but couldn't unsee anymore. I drove back to Brooklyn in a daze. My apartment looked different that night, messy, but mine small but safe. I walked straight to my workbench, tracing my fingers along the tools I'd collected over the years. Hammers, pliers, little files worn smooth from use. This was my life. No slides, no intervention, no decision made for me. Just craft, creation, ownership. But then fear crept in, quiet, sharp. What if they're right? What if this is a phase? What if the business collapses next year? What if I really am the disappointment? Those thoughts, those cruel echoes didn't come from me. They came from years of conditioning, years of being measured against a mold I was never meant to fit. I opened my laptop, scrolling through my financials, trying to see what they saw. But the numbers told a different story: steady growth, repeat customers, profitable quarters, expanding demand. Harbor and Hill's email sat starred in my inbox waiting for my reply. The reality was simple: my business wasn't failing. My family just couldn't comprehend success that didn't look like theirs. I didn't know it then, but this realization would become my backbone later. The next conflict came the following morning. I woke up to missed calls, first from Chloe, then from Vivian, then from Dad. The texts rolled in like timed explosives. "Where are you? Call me back now. You're being dramatic. Come home." But the worst one came from Chloe. "Mom says you left without saying a word. Really mature. You know she's been planning this Christmas for months, right? Everything's not about you." My fingers trembled as I read it. "Everything's not about you." The irony was almost painful. They were planning an entire public humiliation centered around me. Then Another message came through, shorter, sharper. Also, your room isn't cleared out. Don't twist things. I stared at that message for a full minute, feeling heat rise in my chest. I had literally seen the boxes. Gaslighting had always been my family's second language. That afternoon, I visited Dr. Lewis. Her office smelled like peppermint tea and old books. Snow dusted the windows. I sat on the couch, hands knotted in my lap, trying to stitch my words together. I don't understand how parents can do that, I said, voice cracking. She didn't rush to respond. Ava, what you overheard wasn't concern. It was coercion. That intervention wasn't designed to help you. It was designed to break your resistance. But why? The question came out small and childlike. Because your success, your independence, challenges the story they tell about themselves. A family like yours values image, uniformity, legacy. You stepping away from that threatens their control. I swallowed hard. The room felt heavier. And the LLC doctor? Lewis asked. I nodded. They put a company in my name. I don't even know what it's for. Dr. Lewis leaned forward slightly. That's not just a boundary violation. That's a legal risk. You need a lawyer. The word lawyer made my stomach drop. But she was right. I left her office feeling equal parts broken and clearer than I had in months. Back home, I called an attorney friend, Kayla, who specialized in corporate and tax law. When I explained what I'd overheard, she didn't even try to hide her alarm. Ava, that could be serious. If your name is on anything shady or any structure used for tax optimization, you need documentation immediately. You need to protect yourself. Hearing that terrified me. Protect myself. From my own family. That was conflict number 2, facing the reality that my parents hadn't just disrespected me, they'd entangled me. The third conflict hit shortly after. Rosa called from the estate. Her voice was shaky, low. Miss Ava, they wanted me to move the rest of your things today. I stalled them. I told them I couldn't find the tape, but they're determined. You need to come get your belongings after the holidays, not before, not during. They don't want you here. My throat tightened. Rosa, thank you. You deserve better, she whispered. You always have. When the call ended, I sat very still, feeling something inside me rearrange. A recognition. A truth I had been running from for years. I wasn't part of my family's plan. I was an obstacle in it. And that realization hurt in a way I can't put into words. But something else was beginning to wake up inside me too. Something sharper, something resolute. Something that whispered, enough. 2 days before Christmas, the air in Brooklyn felt colder than usual. I woke up before sunrise, unable to shake the buzzing tension under my skin. I kept replaying their voices in that office, the calmness, the certainty, the way they discussed me like a line item on a spreadsheet. I told myself I should focus on logistics, on safety, on practical next steps. But emotions have their own gravity. They pull you down no matter how much your brain insists you should float above it. The fourth conflict hit that morning, a voicemail from Dad. Ava, this is unacceptable. We need to have a conversation before tomorrow. Your mother is extremely upset. You've put everyone in an awkward position by disappearing. Call me back, an awkward position. That was the priority, not my feelings. Not the breach of trust. Not the legal mess they'd created in my name. Just the awkward position of the people trying to publicly ambush me. I didn't reply. Around noon, Harbor and Hill emailed again asking if I had time for a meeting after the holidays to finalize the spring line. Their tone was warm, professional, excited. I stared at the email for a long moment, feeling a strange ache in my chest. These strangers believed in me more than my own parents. These strangers saw value. My own family saw liability. The contrast was a wound I didn't know how to bandage. And then came the fifth conflict, one that sliced straight through me. Chloe called. The moment I picked up, she snapped, "Where the hell are you? Mama's losing it." I kept my voice neutral. I'm home. Home seriously. Ava, stop being dramatic. There it was again. Dramatic. Their favorite word for any boundary I tried to set. You left without telling anyone, she continued. Everyone thinks something happened. Something did happen, I said quietly. You're overreacting to a conversation you weren't even supposed to hear, she shot back. And now, Mom is embarrassed. The word embarrassed made something inside me twist. I took a breath. Chloe, I said, voice low. Did you really think humiliating me at dinner was going to fix anything? she scoffed. Humiliate. Oh my God. Ava. It wasn't humiliation. It was an intervention. People your age need guidance. People my age, I repeated. Or daughters who don't fit the family mold. She clicked her tongue. Don't start. But I wasn't starting. I was continuing something that had been building for years. Still, she didn't let me get a word in. You're acting like this business of yours is stable, but it's not. You know it's not. And Dad is right. If you don't get some structure soon, this whole artisan thing is going to blow up in your face. Artisan thing. Like I was selling painted rocks on a sidewalk. My voice came out colder than I intended. Thanks for the concern, Chloe, truly. But I'm not coming back. There was a beat of silence. Then she exhaled sharply. You're making a huge mistake. No, I whispered. I'm finally not. I hung up. That was the first time in my life I ended a call with Chloe on my terms. The sixth conflict came late that afternoon. Mia and Ethan arrived at my apartment with groceries and wine, refusing to let me spiral alone. The moment Mia walked in, she looked around, taking in the way my jewelry sketches littered the coffee table, the open boxes of custom gifts, the half-packed overnight bag I'd abandoned by the door. Ava, she said softly, you look like you haven't slept in a week. I hadn't. Not really. We sat at my tiny kitchen table eating takeout soup. I told them everything, every word, every threat, every cold calculation from that conversation in Dad's office. Ethan shook his head slowly. Wow. That's messed up. Who does that to their own kid? People obsessed with image. Mia said, her jaw tight. People who don't know how to love without controlling. Her voice cracked with anger on my behalf. It made my throat tighten. But then I told them about the LLC, about the legal risk, about the leverage my family thought they had. That's when Mia slammed her palm on the table. No, they don't get to do that. They don't get to tie you to them financially while telling you you're a burden. Ethan nodded. We'll figure it out. You're not alone. Those words, you're not alone, hit deeper than I expected. Because for years I'd convinced myself I had to manage everything by myself just to prove I wasn't the family disappointment they claimed I was. I didn't cry, not then. But a pressure eased in my chest. Later, while they cleaned up the kitchen, I walked into my studio corner and stared at the pendant I was working on for the Harbor and Hill pitch. A thin gold oval, hand-hammered edges, a sapphire embedded in its center. The light hit it just right, making it glow like a tiny promise. I whispered to myself, you're not a phase. You're not nothing. The seventh conflict arrived in the evening, unexpected and quiet. A message from Liam. Ava, call me. I almost ignored it. But something in my gut told me not to. When I answered, Liam sounded different, softer, tired. I didn't agree with the intervention, he said. I know it sounded like I did, but I didn't. I didn't say anything. He continued, I didn't know Mom was clearing out your room. I didn't know about the LLC stuff. That wasn't me. Why didn't you say anything during the meeting? I finally asked. Silence. Then quietly, because in that family, speaking up gets you crushed. You know that. I closed my eyes. So for the first time that day, I felt a flicker of something other than pain clarity. So you stayed quiet, I whispered. He exhaled heavily. Yeah. It wasn't an excuse, but it was the truth, and the truth mattered. Before hanging up, he added, Ava, for what it's worth, your work is good, really good. Jenna, my girlfriend, she's been buying your pieces for years. She just never wanted to make things awkward. My breath caught. So, when you said no one takes my business seriously, I said slowly. He interrupted gently. That wasn't entirely true. I didn't know it then, but Liam's quiet admission would become a tiny stitch in a wound I thought couldn't be healed. When the call ended, I sat in silence, staring at the city lights outside my window. Cars moved like red and white streaks. Snow kept falling. My heart hurt deeply, but something else was growing beneath the hurt. A line, a boundary, something I'd never allowed myself to draw before. By the time the night settled completely, the truth was clear. I wasn't going back to Morgan Estate, not for Christmas, not for the intervention, not for their approval. And for the first time in my entire life, that thought didn't terrify me. It steadied me. Christmas Eve arrived quieter than I expected. No chaos, no frantic packing, No forced smiles, just the soft creak of wood as I stepped into the Catskills cabin Mia had unlocked hours earlier. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, its warm glow spilling across the room. Snow drifted outside in slow, lazy spirals. It smelled like pine, cinnamon, and warmth, everything Morgan Estate never did. My hands were still shaking from the drive, but the moment I walked in, Mia looked up from the couch, her legs tucked under a blanket, and smiled softly. "You made it." Those 3 words nearly undid me. Ethan was in the kitchen, humming off-key, while chopping vegetables. Jade sat on the floor, sorting through ornaments she'd brought from her studio colors scattered like gemstones. Noah leaned against the window, nursing a mug of cider. My chosen family, the people who didn't need me to be perfect to be wanted. "Sit," Mia said, patting the couch. "Breathe." I did. For the first time in days, I did. We spent the evening decorating a small tree we'd dragged inside earlier, stringing lights that blinked warm gold against its branches. Each ornament had a story. Each laugh softened something inside me. Every moment felt like stitching myself back together. But at exactly 7:04 p.m., my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made the room tilt, Mom. The air shifted. Even the fire seemed to quiet. "Answer it," Mia whispered. "You're not alone." I walked into the hallway, phone cold in my hand. My heartbeat thudded in my ears as I picked up. "Ava Elizabeth Morgan," my mother snapped. No greeting, no breath, just anger. "Where are you?" "In the Catskills," I said steadily. "The Catskills? What on earth are you doing there?" "Your grandmother flew in from London to see you. Dinner starts in 10 minutes. Everyone is waiting." Her voice lowered into that icy tone she used when something damaged her image. "You are embarrassing us." I leaned against the wall, the wood warm through my sweater. "No," I said softly. "I'm protecting myself." A sharp inhale. "Excuse me, this was it." The moment everything broke open. "I know about the intervention," I said. Calm, clear. "I heard everything Dad's office. The financial slideshow, the job offer I'm supposed to accept, the threats about cutting me off the LLC in my name. All of it." Silence. A terrible, loaded silence. "Then you were eavesdropping." "That's what you care about." My voice didn't shake this time. "Not the fact that you planned to humiliate me in front of the entire family." "It wasn't humiliation," she said quickly. "It was guidance. You need direction, Ava." "No," I whispered. "You need control." Her tone sharpened like a knife. "If you think running off to some shack in the mountains is maturity, it's healthier than staying there," I cut in. "Healthier than pretending everything's fine while you chisel away at me like I'm a flaw you're trying to sand out of the family." "You are being dramatic," she hissed. There it was again. The word they weaponized. "No," I said. "I'm being honest." Something inside me clicked the way metal snaps perfectly into place. A clarity I'd never had when speaking to her before. From now on, I continued. "Anything tied to my name legally, financially, on paper goes through my lawyer." The silence was thick enough to choke on. "You're making a mistake," she said finally. "Your father will not tolerate this attitude. There will be consequences." I let out a breath I'd been holding for 29 years. "I know," I said, "and I'm not afraid anymore." Snow tapped against the window behind me. The cabin's warmth pressed against my back in a way Morgan Estate never had. "You will regret this, Ava," she snapped. "Maybe," I said, "but it'll be my regret, not the one you designed for me." Before she could fire back, I added, "Your gifts should arrive soon. I spent months on them." My voice softened. "I hope for once you see me." Then I hung up. I stared at the phone, my reflection faint in the dark screen. My pulse was steady, my breathing even. My hands no longer shook. When I returned to the living room, everyone looked up. I didn't have to say a word. They knew. Mia handed me a glass of wine, so I sat down feeling the weight slip off my shoulders. I told her I said everything. Jade grinned. Good. Noah lifted his mug in a toast to Ava choosing Ava. The fire crackled behind us, snow still falling softly outside. For the first time in my life, Christmas felt real. Not a performance, not a perfect photo, but something warm, flawed, human. Then my phone buzzed again. But this time it wasn't my mother. It was a text from Aunt Eleanor. "Just opened your gift. Magnificent craftsmanship. Why has no one told me you're this talented?" A moment later, "Also, your mother has some explaining to do." I smiled. Slow, cold, not cruel, just awake. Because now I knew something my family never expected me to learn. when they tried to humiliate me, erase me, pressure me into being someone I wasn't. They didn't break me. They freed me. And I wasn't going back. Christmas morning in the cabin felt unreal quiet, bright, steady, in a way my life had never been. I woke to the smell of coffee and the low hum of my friends talking in the kitchen. No footsteps on marble floors, no orchestrated perfection, no performance, just warmth. While we sat around the small tree opening simple gifts wrapped in brown paper, my phone buzzed again. A flood of messages, cousins, aunts, even Liam. And then one from Grandma Eleanor. Your mother is unraveling. Your work is extraordinary. Stand firm, Ava. I read the message twice, 3 times. It felt like a door opening one I hadn't even known existed. The next text was from an unknown number. Then I realized it wasn't unknown at all. It was the Harbor and Hill buyer, Olivia. Saw your latest samples. Stunning. Let's talk early January. The spring feature is yours if you want it. Those 4 words hit harder than any insult my family had thrown at me. Choice, freedom, autonomy, the exact things they tried to take. As everyone made breakfast, I stepped onto the porch. Snow glistened on the railing. The air tasted like cold pine. And for the first time in weeks, my mind was quiet enough to think clearly. They thought they had backed me into a corner. They thought the intervention would break me. They thought clearing out my room would push me into obedience. But all they'd done was give me proof that I needed to step out of the script they'd written for me, and a weapon. Because once Harbor and Hill announced our collaboration, once my name went public, once the press release circulated, once my work was seen on a national scale, my parents' narrative would crack. They couldn't call me a phase anymore. They couldn't pretend I was a disappointment. They couldn't claim they were saving me. The image they worked so hard to protect would turn on them. Not because I'd attack them, but because I'd succeed without them. I watched the snow fall thicker, each flake a quiet promise. They thought they could erase me, but all they did was help me step into who I really was. And the story wasn't over. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit like and subscribe. Stories like mine aren't rare, even if no one talks about them out loud, and if you've ever had to choose yourself over the people who were supposed to protect you, stay with me because this journey isn't finished. What happened that Christmas was only the beginning, and the next chapter changed everything. Not just for me, but for the people who thought they could decide my life for me. Tell me in the comments if you want part 2.